So, listening again to Stephen Wischhusen's Last Stand, made 7 years ago, I find myself moved as well as highly entertained. Here we go then. From a pantomime, via a railway junction, a Dutch pianist in a smart London hotel, an enthusiast and his originally sceptical but finally approving parents, we proudly present No Son of Ours Will Be an Usherette, a journey through time, space and red plush, starring Stephen Wischhusen and devised and compiled by Carol Rosen.
Jolly Ditty is really by Robert Schumann, a happy farmer returning from his labour, but there was a syncopated version written by Kerry Mills in 1911. Now the moon shines tonight on pretty red wing, the breeze is sighing, the night bird's crying, for afar 'neath the star her brave is sleeping, while little red wings weeping the night away. So there.
CinemaScope first came out. This is perhaps an example. When CinemaScope first came out, showmanship. You'd start with the Fox title on the small ratio screen. And then when it got to the bit of the da-da-da-da, a CinemaScope picture, the masking would open to reveal to an amazed public the total width of the CinemaScope screen. I described it as looking through a letterbox at people you didn't really know, but you might find out more about. But that was the thing, just to try and impress. And let's look at life. Let's get hold of our line of vision and go and rip it open and take in a lot more, without the physical distress doing that might cause. I think I've said enough, really. For now, you can think of another subject and we'll do how I was sexually assaulted by Andy Pandy in the next reel.
The very first film Stephen ever saw, one afternoon, I said to him, if you behave yourself, we'll go to the pictures and we'll see The Glass Mountain with Michael Dennison. And I said, but you must behave yourself. And he was as good as gold. He was really very good. Only an afternoon matinee, which was at the old Bruce Grove Cinema down in Tottenham. And he sat as good as gold, and he was really thrilled. So I suppose from then he preferred the cinema.
Here's a surprise. It came in the post late last week from the Royal British Legion Poppy Appeal. A certificate of appreciation. Well, you know, it rather knocked me a bit because for 10 years I've been standing outside one or two shops in Lewes on the official collection day and doing quite nicely with the money that's been collected in exchange for the poppies. And I never expected anyone to say thank you or to say it's appreciated. I did it because I felt it was something that needed to be done. To be out there publicly, making the point of collecting for the Royal British Legion. And I was afraid just rather touched by this. I shan't show it to too many people because I think modesty is quite good, but I think I can share it with you because you know me by now anyway. And I just felt a bit of a glow inside. And if I do it for another 25 years, I get a medal and a ribbon. Well, there's something to work for, isn't it? Thanks for listening.
It's well in advance and been learning like mad.
It's the sort of thing that actors aren't too familiar with these days, isn't it?
Not anymore. It's a pity. When I started 20 or so years ago, everywhere did weekly rep, and the natural progression was to go from drama school to weekly rep to the big companies. That died out, and we seem to be starting something wonderful all over again.
What about public response? So far, it has been quite good, hasn't it?
It's been very encouraging. 300 or so season tickets sold in advance. phones going like mad. Now they realise it's actually starting again. It's quite exciting.
Do you carefully choose your productions to suit the crew audience?
Well, I'm a great believer in the theatre as a way of escaping from dreariness and drudge, so we've planned a season mainly of comedies, which they like here, and nothing too high-blown. It's all very homely and domestic.
Apart from Rep, the Lyceum will also stage touring productions, and in summer it's used as a cinema. There isn't another in Crewe, though the return of Rep is the big gamble.
I think we've found the right formula. It's just giving it time for the whole thing to work. Hopefully by the end of the season the world will be beating a path to our door.
And there's just a possibility that the Lyceum might not have to continue its unaided existence. The local council is considering a grant of £30,000 to assist the venture.
Oh, I knew it! I knew it!
Knew what?
I knew we should have gone to Scapeness.
When he was a little kid in a pram, he learnt 2 words before anything else. And everything he come to in his life is, what's that? What's that, he used to say, what's that? I mean, if you come to a lamppost, he'd say, what's that? So we had to lay a lamppost. I mean, he could say rhinoceros was when he was 2 years old. As plain as I'm telling it to you.
Because I was quite young, I think 23, 24, at the time I was here. And I was audacious, as youth often is. And I thought that what I was doing was the only way. We had to show something other than what else was available. That was always the key. We had continually to be different and adventurous, if you like. Who else was showing Secret Ceremony, the Lewes film? Who else did a double bill like Bronco Bullfrog and Lord of the Flies? Or two Lee Marvin films. Anything that had some substance. But another point in our favour, you must remember, there was no video, no DVD. Films were barred from television until they had been on theatrical release for 5 years. There was quite a wealth of stuff to go back through. And I made the best of that I could. The opportunities for repertory cinemas now is much reduced, I think, and the audience has changed. We had a lot of young people. I wouldn't say that the audience, the weekly audience, was particularly typified by any one type. They came according to what film was on, so we had a lot of extremely well-behaved middle-class skinheads for Bronco Bullfrog. We had another totally different strata of audience for Royal Hunt of the Sun, and indeed also for Isadora. But that was what I was after. But we did have a Phoenix audience, in the sense that they were coming for a film experience rather than just a night out, and they travelled some distance.
It's a good afternoon for some.
I do qualify, in fact, now to call myself something like the National Picture House Company, because I've got one nearly everywhere. The Board of Trade, perhaps it's not called that anymore, always said that you couldn't call yourself British or national unless you actually spanned the... Well, I do. So you are talking to a national institution. As the quota system has gone, you must know about it. No, never done quota. And ED money, EADY. Well, we had quite a good local national audience for British produced pictures until American talkies came in and American musicals. We had a very innocent, naive way of life, if you like, or if you don't, I think we did, which we portrayed quite well in our own films. But American films offered, gosh, gangsters and things like that. And so American films began to predominate at the box office. There was also a thing called blind booking. You could only have X film if you showed ABC as well. So you were contracted up for films you'd never seen. You had no way of knowing what they were like. So trade shows were introduced. So a film could not be rented out until it had been shown to the trade. That was the first thing. Then, to counter the dominance of American cinema, never from Europe, always American cinema really, came the Quota Act, where first-run cinemas had to show at least 33% British films as first feature, and the same amount of supporting film had to be British-made, which is how the Bond films in the end snuck in as British quota, because they were filmed at Shepperton with British technicians and British artists. Or Pinewood, as I think was the more correct place they were made. And eventually the quota system had to embrace European films, because when we joined the EU, you had to put continental European films into that quota, because it was against the regulations to support a national cinema against the rest of Europe. And in the end, the quota system went. But there was ED money to pay for these British films, which we were required to show. Every cinema ticket over 9p had to pay film levy, which went into a British filmmaking fund. Well, tied up in red tape. We're very good at that, aren't we? I mean, that's how we had no unemployment. We had a lot of bureaucrats.
So, European films weren't really coming into this country until the 70s?
They were. I'm not sure that they really did then. There were cinemas which showed European films.
You showed European films?
I showed European films at East Finchley, and in the original language with subtitles. If you think of the Costa Gavras film Z, and the other one he did, La Ver, most cinemas showed them in dubbed versions. I didn't like that. You miss the nuance in the portrayal of the roles if you're showing a dubbed film. So I preferred to have the emphasis of the original language translated into English in subtitles. Everyman Hampstead always did it. The Little Theatre Bath always did it. Paris Pullman always did it. The Academy Oxford Street always did it. But at that time, we were few and far between. The National Film Theatre, of course, did it.
You had to go abroad, didn't you, to get a lot of these films?
I didn't have to. It suited me to see what Poland and Belgium and other countries had to offer. So I brought in quite a few films from Film Polski, which was shown in the Cambridge Film Festival and at the Imperial Portobello Road, now known as the Electric, and a few other places, and featured in the Brighton Film Festival occasionally. It's very good.
You had to cross the wall, didn't you?
I didn't cross it, I flew over it. Well, yes, Poland didn't have a wall. It was difficult enough to get to, because in those days you could not go to an Eastern Bloc country without being invited by a state institution. Couldn't just go as, hey, yeah, I'd like to go and see Warsaw. No. You had to apply for a visa, but you also had to have a letter of introduction. Mine was originally from the University Marie Curie Skłodowska in Lublin, which was the state university. And I became very pally with Film Polski, who thought, this is one of the things one learns, their subtitles, Polish films which were subtitled into any other language, the subtitles were stamped with a punch into the print. And they thought video was a great thing because you could project the subtitles by video without damaging the print. That's what they thought. That was interesting to see.
How do you do that?
Pardon?
How do you...
Well, you have a video projector, which there were. Those strange, cumbersome things that showed 3 colours, which merged into the image. Hello, here we are at what was Pinwell Lane. It ran up through here to the top of the High Street. It became closed off some years ago, and this land is now called Manorial Waste. And we have to thank Every, the great Lewes ironmaster, for bringing the gateway from the Greyfriars Franciscan Priory here. This is the only bit that remains. The Premier Inn is now on the site and had been a railway station before. This is the much vaunted secret garden. Until just a few years ago, it was covered in weeds, brambles, and goodness knows what else. I suggested to the friends of Lewes that it would be better, considering its location behind this ancient gateway, if we could cultivate it a bit. And aided by Jane Tyra and Gillian Ross, I've managed to turn it into this. I'm somewhat embarrassed to say a lot of people keep coming to take photos of it. And I can see there's an overturned pot I must rescue. But here we are. This is one of the better examples of the fruits of my labours. And I hope it gives you pleasure. Thank you. Family burial place of William Edwin and Anne Baxter. And dear little Emily in amongst the undergrowth somewhere. The hollyhocks will be butchered this week. But it is rather nice, the bizarre colours matching exactly how Victorian colour printing was done. But it will get a tidy up this week, I promise. Because it'll be me that does it. Oh, and the bees. I'm so pleased to see bees and butterflies around here. There is one feeding. Isn't that wonderful? There's one bee I've saved. It's easy to get lost in the middle of this. See, zinnias, nearly 3 foot tall. They're only supposed to grow a foot. Must have been a good horse. So much colour. Well, I don't think death should be sombre. It should always be a bit bright and jolly. We'll just move this. Let the colour radiate. That's it. It looks good from the other end, don't it? Like all shows, backstage is not so pretty. Mind the bricks behind you. Evening. I've had a haircut. It's difficult to know which one, but it's a lot tidier than it was.
Photos.
That bird song is really lovely, isn't it?
Isn't it? Even at 2:30 in the morning.
Mm.
Here's the Catlin's shop trade card. It's me. Everyone knows Catlin's, with a hammer and sickle and a price gun on the back of it.
Catlin's is regarded as somewhat of an institution these days.
Well, I was talking to Chico Shankland yesterday, and he said he was talking to Anthony, who runs the Riverside.
Yeah.
And they agreed there was no one who is now of that age who didn't know Catlin's, who didn't come in there. It's quite astonishing, really. Oh, and here's old man Catlin when he was about 16. Look at that. Which one's him? There, looking like Alfred E. Newman. This is someone who became a professor emeritus at the University of East Anglia in sociology, who, I don't know whether I can say this or not, but he was my schoolboy. We found photos of... Oh, do you remember a song which won the Eurovision contest called Looking High, 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 Looking Low, 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 sung by Brian Johnson? Here he is. We just finished doing a pantomime engagement at the Liverpool Empire. Jimmy Harman, who was the stage manager, and the Ugly Sister or something, and there's me. Look, Ginge. Absolutely Ginge, what's left there. So there was then. And, oh, when it was the Queen's birthday, we got... Network Rail sent something for the Queen's birthday 2 years ago, and it's still got the British Rail bloody logo on it. Can you imagine? That's probably why they sent it for nothing. But that was quite fun. Your photos, I think. Great Uncle Werner is in that. Yes, here he is. Werner, who died in Baden-Baden in the 60s. He won the Iron Cross First Class and the Knight's Cross in the Second World War and the Iron Cross Second Class in the First War. And he was a field doctor. There. There is, I'm pleased to say, no resemblance whatsoever.
I thought you came from Jewish descent.
German, Jewish. One reason, we are not in Germany.
Right.
The Jew bit came later. It was oh, and I look really happy. That was great-grandfather married Maria Larendon, except he never married her. And that is where the Jew comes from. So at best, you see, we're only Mishkins. But this Johnny Evans, who lives in Seaford, so being only half the thing, what one suffers, in fact, Richard, is the worst excesses of Protestantism and Judaism shoved on one at the same time. It was an unfortunate thing of history. But there you are. And certainly, I don't mind either origin, really. The family for years denied the German and tried to make out we were Dutch, but we weren't. And quite funny, really. They praised the Jewish side more than the German. And it may seem odd now. At Brighton, we had a nitrate license to exhibit stuff from Elstree archives, which did mean 2 operated in the box at all time, and we had to show a slide saying, this theatre is equipped with protection devices in the operating box. In case of fire, these will be dropped. These will now be tested, and you had to do it in the presence of an audience. So there'd be this terrific clang as these iron shutters came down over the portholes. And then it needed the strength of 10 men to lift the bloody things up and get the place in right order for screening again. It was
Do you think that the way things are done now, do you think it's so bad? I mean, lots of people kind of get very upset that there isn't a projectionist anymore.
Pigeon's not needed, is he? I'll scream blue murder, excuse me. Blue murder! That's the way to deal with those. And
isn't it funny where these big circuits don't seem to be able to make money? Because of greed, you know. I mean, I would be happy just to cover expenses and break even. To keep these places going. Because I have no shareholders to satisfy, other than me. I think the public is entitled to these facilities. And as long as I can make them happen, why shouldn't I? Want to enchant anyone. Want to give value for money, entertainment. And continue to entertain. But money is not... How can you say... I mean, that can't be always the first reward. Surely. You have to be pleased with what you are doing, and if what you are doing brings other people pleasure, what else do you need? If you're that hungry, you can have a bar of chocolate for nothing off the kiosk, excuse me, but... You can't judge human pleasure on monetary return. Otherwise, I'd run a brothel.
Do you have like a golden age for you?
there are many golden ages. An age I only barely remember, like going to see the 50s version of Moby Dick, could have been a golden age because there were queues and it was a thing to see. To go to a cinema, it was quite unusual. Working in the cinema was definitely a very golden age for me. Being able to change the programme policy at East Finchley was, God, I lived it. It was wonderful. It was really pleasing to see that what an audacious 22 or 3-year-old thought was what people wanted, except it wasn't what people wanted, it was what a certain section of the large minorities which exist in London wanted. And we did so well. I was so pleased. But those days cannot come again, because then you had to wait 5 years before the television release of a film. There was no video. The world was my oyster, or anyone's oyster who wanted to do something different. But now the window between theatrical and domestic release is getting ever shorter. It's 3 months now. And for some DVDs, it is simultaneous. And I think it is acknowledged that the film companies make their money from the DVDs. They get their returns quicker from the DVDs than they do from cinema exhibitions. Which is sad. It's almost the egg before the chicken now.
Music with me singing and those languid eyes, lulling you to sleep. Save your sorrow for tomorrow. Smile a while today. Life is fun to anyone who hums. Live today, tomorrow never comes. If you cheer up, skies will clear up, clouds will roll away. So save your sorrow for tomorrow and smile a while today.